glad that your New Year's resolution about watching football with me is going well. But could you at least root for my team?
Hi everyone, this is Will O'Toole with another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. I'd like to welcome you as we get set for really a month of NFL playoffs. And of course, really, as we go into tonight's game between Dallas and Tampa Bay, some of the games have been really exciting, particularly, of course, the New York Giants upset over the Minnesota Vikings. That was one I actually had no real problems predicting. I really thought the Giants were going to win. However, that being said, never take any of my forecasts or predictions to the bank because I'm usually wrong. Just think of me when I'm talking about Michigan football or Michigan basketball. I'm always wrong on that one. But thought the Giants played well yesterday. And again, the Cincinnati game was pretty exciting last night. Blowout city with really San Francisco over Seattle. And of course, it was a pretty exciting game between Jacksonville and San Diego. San Diego. Can't even say they're San Diego anymore. The LA Chargers again. So some pretty good games. And this week coming, there should be even some better games as Kansas City gets into the fray. The Buffalo game was pretty good too against Miami. That being said, today's show, obviously just highlighting a little bit of the football, but really what I want to get into is want to talk about the second player who's done something. And this is kind of within the theme of Martin Luther King Day. I know it's a big celebration for the country, civil rights leader who was born on this day. And we celebrate that with all kinds of sports, actually, when you think about it now, between college basketball, pro basketball, and of course now the NFL moving one of its playoffs games last couple of years to a Monday night affair. Anyway, my whole premise for the show is I was thinking about this because, and I'm linking this, so bear with me. I loved the Apollo space program way back in the 60s and early 70s, probably a product of that whole space race between the United States and the Soviets. And when Neil Armstrong set foot on the moon, being the first person in the world to ever really put his foot down on another world, I always thought, and always remembered, who the second guy was to do the same feat, no pun intended. And that, of course, was Montclair's Buzz Aldrin. So I'd like to feature today not just the first African-American to break some sort of record or become an event like Jackie Robinson becoming the first African-American to break the color line in baseball, but also do similar thing. Who was the second? Ironically, I know it seems to be a theme as well. It is Patterson's Larry Doby who becomes the second black to play in baseball and actually the first in the American League. And then I'd like to talk a little bit about the NFL. Some of the players now who have who also broke the color line. It's a little bit different for the NFL. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the first I'd like to do is the NBA. And people don't realize this, but the very first player to break the color barrier in the NBA, it happened in the 50s. Now, recall that the NBA, as a professional organization, it was kind of cobbled between the Basketball Association and the National Basketball League. Some of the franchises fell apart, so they kind of cobbled a league together. And at the time, you actually had 3 New York teams in the NBA, Rochester, Syracuse, and New York. I always, and if I do it again today, I apologize, but sometimes I have done this in the past where I confused Rochester with Syracuse. Just to be fair, the Syracuse Nationals come into the NBA and played against the Rochester Royals. The Rochester Royals will become the Cincinnati Royals, who then become the Kansas City Omaha Kings, who then become the Sacramento Kings. So they've had actually 5 different places where they have played. Actually, I think it was this. I think they became Kansas City, then became Kansas City Omaha, then Kansas City again, and then finally moved out. And I can't believe that they're out in Sacramento about 30, almost 35 years. It's incredible how time flies. They were a team that does win a championship up in Rochester. But today's feature is the Syracuse Nationals, who will move to Philadelphia and become the Philadelphia 76ers after the Philadelphia Warriors move to Golden State and become first the San Francisco Warriors and then the Golden State. Why that is kind of interesting is because the second black head coach, all right, will be Al Attles of the Golden State Warriors, who was also from New Jersey, courtesy of Weequahic High School and Newark, New Jersey. So it's kind of interesting how all the second guys who break the color line seem to be or have some connection to New Jersey, the Garden State. So it's kind of cool that way. Now, how do I make the connection between the astronauts? Like I said, and I'm just going to go off on a little tangent here about the Apollo space mission. I'll never forget it. I was about 8 years old. It was the summer of '69. Of course, the Mets had their fantastic run, the Miracle Mets. Well, there was another miracle that occurred that July, and that was the landing of the lunar module on the surface of the moon. And of course, Neil Armstrong comes out, announces to the world, this is one giant step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Now, over the years, Armstrong stated that he actually said the article A, one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Can be kind of significant, I guess, in the quote. I have to be honest with you. I've heard the audio numbers of times. I love playing it again and again. And to be fair, I never hear the article A. So maybe he does say it. Maybe it got jumbled in the transmission from 250,000 miles away in a vacuum called space back to the United States and the Johnson Space Center, in Houston, Mission Control, through all kinds of atmospheric breakups, magnetic fields like the Van Allen radiation belt, etc. So he could have easily have said, amen. But either case, it was probably, for many baby boomers, probably the most significant event in our lifetime, and probably the most significant event in probably the late 20th century. Again, second guy who walks the moon is from Montclair, Buzz Aldrin. And why I always thought this was kind of cool, I grew up in Verona, and we were home to the Annan Flag Factory. And they always promoted themselves as the flag makers of the world. Funny thing is, I do believe that it was the Annan Flag Company that makes the flags that were put on the surface of the moon. And of course, you can see Aldrin and Armstrong affixing the flag on a pole and then setting the pole into the lunar surface. Pretty remarkable stuff. And now man and the United States has set their sights again on potentially colonizing the moon over the next 50, 60 years of the 21st century, and then eventually probably moving there to Mars. Just as I always say, I really thought by this time there'd be a McDonald's on Mars with the catchphrase served 5 billion Martians already or whatever. But as a kid, 9 years old, you're always thinking, wow, if they, and here's the thing, the beauty of that lunar landing was that they do it again successfully 5 more times. I think it was 17 guys that walked, 17 or 13 guys that walked the surface of the moon. Pretty incredible. And of course, the hit movie with Tom Hanks, the Apollo adventure that had to detour and get back for its own survival, is also just a monumental moment in space history and also in rocketry and all the rest of it, because you can get them there. Can you get them back safely when there are problems? And of course, that space mission, they do come back successfully. And by the way, I know that when Richard Nixon was president, he already had like a speech prepared in the event that the astronauts, Armstrong and Aldrin, were going to perish on the surface. So pretty remarkable. People don't realize the risks that they took. an incredible event in our nation's history. Now, when I tie that in, of course, just always remember, I try to do this program as if we're just sitting having a couple of brews and a hamburger after a big successful win in a ball game or whatever. So a lot of things come on my mind, and my whole point was, all right, let's talk about the second guy. We all know it's Jackie Robinson for baseball, and we all know that it was Earl Lloyd, who was the first black to break the color line in the NBA. But here's the thing, and I'm sure probably many New York fans, particularly Knicks fans, know that it was Nat Sweetwater Clifton who actually was the second black player in the NBA. And I was taking a look at both of those players, very similar in both statistics and probably their play. And the only thing I have to say with Earl Lloyd, he played for a really, really sound basketball team. And you could probably argue that when he comes to the Syracuse Nationals during the 50-51 team, and then he spends a year in the Army. But I was just looking, and I'm using Basketball Reference. It's a great site. Earl Lloyd comes into the NBA. He played a total of 560 games and actually comes up with, in his first year with the Washington Capitals, 50-51, and then makes his way to Syracuse. And for that, he plays with Al Servey of the Syracuse, guy who actually grew up his whole life really in upper New York State. And now I'm digressing a little bit. But my whole point is this. Earl Lloyd comes to Syracuse. He is the first black in the NBA. Helps lead Syracuse, the Nationals, to their first and only championship. They defeat the Fort Wayne Pistons, and then they lose to the Minneapolis Lakers, who become, of course, the LA Lakers. Their coach at the time was Al Servey, who was really a great, great coach. Probably, had he not had, I was reading, he had a very tough demeanor, attitude, sometimes was harder than probably he should have been on the players, although many of the players give him credit. I was reading a story about his passing from about 13 years ago, and Dolph Schayes, who was on those Nat teams along with Earl Lloyd. Here is the Nat team. All right. This is the Nat team. And here is Sweetwater and Earl Lloyd. And of course, Nat Sweetwater is the second black in the NBA. And of course, Earl Lloyd is the first, just by a couple of games and one season or two. But Al Servey, who was the coach of that team, and they did have one other black player on that Syracuse team, and I'm just going to get it real quick. They had a fella they had Earl Lloyd, and as you can see on that other side, they had NBA champions in 54-55. On that roster was a fellow by the name of Jim Tucker, who went to Duquesne. He was just a rookie, and I'm going to show you this. This is Lloyd, and this is Tucker. As you can see, here is Lloyd, and this is Tucker. I'm just reading his names right now. And this is, of course, the head coach, Al Servey. And this, of course, is Dolph Schayes, who is also a Syracuse grad. Anyway, that team, I was reading about Dolph Schayes, and he said that they were good players, but Servey really taught them to be intense and to not quit. And one of the things that he used to do, the coach of the Nationals, Servey, was just, he actually played one-on-one basketball with several of the players. He was initially hired as a player coach for Servey. He never went to college, served in the Armed Air Forces during World War II, came out, and then really just goes into the NBA as a player and then eventually as a player coach and then head coach. And his teams won, had some down years, obviously, and then he kind of soured about the game of basketball. they do move to Philadelphia. I think he did coach for a few games down there, and then the game just soured on him. And then he returns to Upper New York State. I think he was from either Rochester or that area of Upper New York State. But you can see that the NBA not only had a number of teams in Upper New York State, but many of their players were from that region, and some of their coaches as well. But Servey is the first and only coach to lead the Nationals to their own NBA title. And of course, they move and become the Philadelphia 76ers and don't get their first championship until Wilt and Chet Walker and Hal Greer lead and I think Billy Cunningham might have been on that team. That was a great team, those Philadelphia 76ers, and they finally break the monopoly of the Boston Celtics and win an NBA championship in the 67 season. Just remarkable. But Earl Lloyd would be seen today as one of those players that would come off the bench and give you some good minutes, averaged about 8-9 points a game, was certainly not in the realm of course, probably the greatest player of that time. Well, statistically speaking, that's a great argument. I know it's always Chamberlain has all the numbers. Russell has all the rings. So I'd rather have the rings. And for Bill Russell, a contemporary of his time, or a little bit later on, he would be leaving the NBA as Russell would be coming in, along with Chamberlain. They came in late 50s. Anyway, Earl Lloyd and even Clifton, Sweetwater Clifton, were serviceable players. They were certainly not great players, but they were good players. And in fact, Clifton does make an all-star team. In fact, he does average double digits a couple of years with the Knicks, who were, when I was doing the research on this, I always thought the Knicks just were terrible. I thought they were like the Philadelphia A's of the NBA in terms of that they were always in last place. Actually, they were one of those teams that were just always stuck in the middle. They had, if you take a look at the years that Sweetwater played with the Knicks, they probably would come out to be about a 500 team over the life, over his career. But they were basically, when he came in, they were like 44-38, let's say, or 38-34. Then they would go down to like 28 and whatever. So they were kind of up and down, but basically mediocre, which is why Knicks fans went so crazy in 1970 when the Knickerbockers won the championship. And then again, they win it in 73. Kind of remarkable. They get 2 championships in the space of about 5 years, when in all the other years of their existence, they come up with nothing. It's just how it goes in sports. And of course, they had to always play against the Boston juggernaut too, of Russell and Havlicek and Cowens and JoJo White and all those Satch, Sanders, and all those great, Bob Cousy, all those great players that would play for the Celtics. Man, they have so many Hall of Famers you can't even think of all of them. That's how many they have. Just numerous. And of course, so Lloyd and Sweetwater Clifton are the first 2 players in the NBA as players. Now, obviously, you've heard me do this on the show before, talking about Bill Russell, the great Bill Russell. And this is why everyone's wearing number 6 in the NBA this year. Of course, Russell passed away last August. But Russell was also probably, I would say he's going to be, this is a good argument. He's probably going to be the last player coach to ever lead a team to a championship, because obviously it's not done anymore, or if it is, it's just for a short period of time until everything is set in a row. I know we had Frank Robinson after that. We've had other player coaches, but Lenny Wilkins, I think, was a player coach, and all the rest of it. For a time, I do believe he was. But he'll probably be the last player coach to ever lead a team to a championship in any of the 4 major sports in North America. I can't obviously address European or South American, let's say soccer or other sports, Australian rules, football or rugby and all the rest of it. But our major sports, probably he'll be the last. Russell, of course, leads the Celtics to a championship, still playing about 30, 35 minutes for the Celtics. And, of course, they would beat Chamberlain and the Lakers. I think he beat Chamberlain and any Chamberlain team. I think he beat them like 4 or 5 times in the playoffs during his career. Just incredible. For one point, do you realize this? And I said this already. This is how incredible Russell was. Leads San Francisco to back-to-back titles. Then goes to the Olympics. Then leads the Celtics to a championship. So in the space of about 16 months, he won 2 NCAA titles, a gold medal, and an NBA championship. That's incredible. All the while joining the Celtics in December after the games were played in Melbourne, 1956. Pretty remarkable. All right, the second player, didn't realize this until I was doing some more research this morning. Always loved this guy because outside of Barry White, probably has the deepest voice I've ever heard in a person. Barry White, of course, is a great rock and roll singer back in the 70s. But Al Attles, who was the first black coach of the San Francisco Warriors, the second black coach in the NBA, following, of course, Bill Russell. Here's the interesting thing about Al Attles. When Chamberlain scored all those points for the Philadelphia 76ers against the Knicks, Al Attles, I think, was the second leading scorer in that game. He had 14 points. And, of course, Al Attles was, as a player, just like Earl Lloyd and Sweetwater, averaged just under 9 points a game, played 700 games in his career. He was with that Philadelphia Warrior team, and I said it was the Philadelphia 76ers, my bad. Played with the Warriors in that 62 contest against the Knicks. Ready for this? He's the second leading scorer for the Philadelphia Warriors in the game in which Chamberlain scored all those points. And I wish that they had, they do have the schedule. Let me just get this because I remember the date. It was like March 2nd. So I can get that real quick. March 2nd, it was in Hershey Park against the Knicks. Here's the box score. The final score of that game was 169 to 147. How many times do you score 147 points in a game and lose? But not just lose, but you lose by 22 points. At that point, the Warriors were 47-29, and the Knicks were 27-46. In that particular game, pardon me, Al Attles didn't score 14. He scored 17 points in 34 minutes. In other words, had he played the whole 48 minutes, he would have scored 24 points. Ready for this? Will Chamberlain had 100 points, only 2 personal fouls. He had 25 rebounds and 2 assists, and he made 28 of 32 free throws in that game. That's incredible. The rest of the guys on that Philadelphia Warrior team, really good players. Guy Rogers, Tom Meshery, Al Attles, serviceable player, who was 8 of 8 from the field. He was perfect. Oh, by the way, Chamberlain, 36 of 63. He had 57% of his field goal attempts in that game. 4 of 7, excuse me. Yes, 57%. Al Attles was a perfect 1,000 in that game. Just amazing. And for the Knicks, ready? Their leading scorer was Richie Guerin, who would later go on and coach the Knicks. He's a Jersey guy as well. He had 39. Cleveland Buckner had 33, and Willie Knowles had 31 for the Knicks, and they still lost by 22. How many times do you get 3 guys score 30 points in a game and lose? It's incredible. Not only lose, but lose by 22 points. It's just one of those things that occurs in sports. Anyway, Al Attles. I just want to say this. I always thought it was, I knew it was Al Attles. There was a guy, though, Bob Hopkins, becomes the second black coach. And the only reason I say this, for the Seattle Sonics, when he follows Bill Russell. And Hopkins, of course, is let go after starting 5-17 in the 77-78 season. I remember this well. And then another black coach comes in by the name of Lenny Wilkens, who is a great player, Hall of Famer with the Hawks, went to Providence College. And then he becomes the third black player. And when you think about it, with the NBA, he wins a championship 78-79. Russell wins his in 69. Al Attles wins his in 74-75. Amazing. In about three titles in under 10 years in the NBA. 10 years, 10 seasons. Pretty remarkable. But Al Attles, I don't know why he never got another job. But I do want to go back to this real quick. And that is this. If I can go back. I just want to go Al Attles. As a player, 8.9. As a coach, though, he was definitely I always thought he was a really good coach. And I don't know why he never got another job. Now, he goes, in his first full season, he goes 41-41. That was 70-71. Believe me, they were an okay team, mediocre at best. In 71-72, Golden State is 20 games above. And he loses in the playoffs 4 out of 5 games. In 73, again, they make the playoffs. They go farther into the playoffs. They finish the regular season 47-35. Then in 73-74, he's 44-38. So you're seeing a pattern. Yeah, they're up, they're down, but they're over 500. He's getting them to play. The next year, I think it might be the second full season that they get Rick Barry back. They only finished 48-34, which is great. You're 14 over. But he went 12-5 and becomes NBA championship. I'll never forget this. Not only does he go 12-5, he beats the Washington Bullets in 4 straight games in the NBA championship. He played a hard-fought series against the Bulls, who I really liked back in the day. They had Bob Love and Chet Walker, Jerry Sloan. Pretty successful coach. They had not Norm Nixon. They had Norm Van Leer, who had come over in a trade with the Royals. They had Tom Boerwinkle and Dennis Autry as their centers. But that team, ready for this, had a guy named Clifford Ray. Ready for this? They had Rick Barry, Butch Beard, Steve Bracey, Bill Bridges, Derek Dickey, Charles Dudley, Charles Johnson, George Johnson, Fred Kendrick, Jeff Mullins, Clifford Ray, Phil Smith, and Jamal Wilkes. Now, Wilkes was a really good player, had come from UCLA, was a rookie. He had an unorthodox foul shot, but it worked. They had, of course, Hall of Famer in Rick Barry, who had left the NBA and the San Francisco Warriors to go play originally for the Oakland Oaks, and then he would make his way to the Nets, where he led them to the 72 championship, but they lost to the Kentucky Colonels. And then you had Clifford Ray, who was a center, who was kind of like acquired, I believe, from the Bulls. And or he wound up with the Bulls, whatever. He was just a third-year player. And really playing under Attles, he played very, very well. He was kind of the glue, I always thought, of the front court. You had Barry, really a small really a shooting guard today, more than the small forward. And they were big. They had a number of guys who were like 6'6", 6'9", about 220, 230. And then they had smooth Jamal Wilkes, who, of course, would go on and play for the LA Lakers and would just be incredible there. But they upset. Not only did they upset, they just took them to the cleaners, the Washington Bullets, or they were the Capitol Bullets. And before that, they were the Baltimore Bullets. Then it became the Washington Wizards. But nobody, I really thought that Washington would finally get their championship that they were waiting for. You know, in the early 70s, they were getting beat by the Knicks, it seemed, every year. Then they get to the championship, and they get buzzed by Lou Alcindor, a.k.a. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and the Bucks' first championship. And then, of course, they keep falling to the New York Knicks, it seemed. It seemed like the Knicks and the Bullets were always playing in the first round or the second round of every NBA playoff. during the 70s. It was incredible. But Al Attles wins. Don't ask me why, though. He doesn't. It's kind of amazing. He finished 48-34. The next year, of course, tough coming back. He won 59 games. And then he won 46, 43, so he's still over 500. By 78-79, he was 38-44. Then in 79-80, I think he got sick, and he was 18-43. He does manage to get Golden State back over 500 by the 81-82 season. And then he becomes an assistant coach, and then the following season he retires from coaching 30. I do think that he had some health issues, as I recall. And that would be the reason why 79-80 he was 18-43 after 60 games. I don't think he completed the season for some reason. And I think it was health issues. But he coached over 1,000 games, had a .518 winning percentage. Now, look, it's not like it is today. For the Golden State Warriors to win way back when, it was kind of remarkable because you really basically had the Celtics, the Lakers, and the Knicks were just coming down from their great run with Frazier and DeBusschere and Bradley and Reed and all the rest of it. So Al Attles, the second black NBA coach in history, and he's also the second black coach to lead a team to the NBA. It's amazing how all of these tie-ins come into play. Now, I'm going to just segue to football because this way I'm not running out of time like I always do. And I just want to get to probably the first four guys that played in the NFL. All right. And Marion Motley, I guess, is seen. I'm going to spend more time with Marion Motley than any of the other guys. And the reason being is that some of the other guys, like Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, didn't really spend all that much time in the NFL playing. Actually, Woody Strode, if you're a big movie fan like I am, and particularly Westerns, you know that Woody Strode, one of his best roles that he was ever in was Liberty Valance. And I didn't realize this until I was checking up a little bit about his biography, that he actually was also in the movie Spartacus and a couple of other I think a couple other Sword and Sandals, as they're called. But I always knew him from the Western Liberty Valance, which is one of the few John Wayne movies I will watch, but it's not one of my particular favorites. And it's a great movie. I don't know why it just bothers me so much. Jimmy Stewart is in it. Lee Marvin, of course, plays Liberty Valance. Here, I'm going to show you Woody Strode up there. It's a great picture. One of my favorite actresses is in that of all time. And of course, Vera Miles. And then they had a number of actors who were in either John Ford Westerns or with John Wayne in a number of movies. Like, I'm just trying to think. Some of them, you'll see them. They are character actors. One guy in particular, he always played a Norwegian type of immigrant. He was also in The Searchers. Just remarkable pictures that Wayne was in, these cowboy movies. What did make Liberty Valance a really good and a fantastic study for movie fans and even ones who are just getting into cinema as a hobby to study and see directors as authors of a movie. They are authors of a movie. They do things that a author will do in a book. I'm getting off on a tangent again. But anyway, Woody Strode was in that. He played John Wayne's second fiddle, in a sense. He plays his top hand on John Wayne's farm and really is a protector of John Wayne because in the movie Liberty Valance, Tom, can't remember his last name, the character's name in it, but John Wayne is his usual tough, very brusque, very short-tempered cowboy rancher. And he and Jimmy Stewart, of course, are really both in love with Vera Miles. Vera Miles, of course, was supposed to, quote unquote, marry John Wayne, but then Jimmy Stewart and his personality, he's a lawyer, comes in and sweeps her off her feet. So that was how the movie is. So Wayne both hates and really loves Jimmy Stewart and is his protector. But Woody Strode is John Wayne's protector as well, actually saves him from a raging fire that Wayne started in a drunken stupor, sets fire to this brand new extension of his house that he was building for when he got married to Vera Miles in the movie, and that was not to be. So Woody Strode plays the guy who really is a protector of actually Jimmy Stewart as well, but mostly of John Wayne. He goes in there and rescues Wayne from the burning building and all the rest of it. But Strode had some, I think he had what we would consider in baseball a cup of coffee in the NFL, and saw that he just didn't like it as much. And being out in California, I think they played for the Rams. He just enters into Hollywood and really has a pretty good career as a Hollywood actor. Bill Willis played for the Browns, and I was looking at this. I had never really heard of Willis. You got to understand, the funny thing about football is that one thing why I think baseball is so romanticized by people my age, and I'm talking about the boomer generation, is the fact that we did collect their baseball cards, plus the fact that you actually saw the players' faces. So you had more of a connection to the players. When the guys are covered in helmets, whether it's in hockey, which is now, and you didn't see much of hockey, plus there's only 6 to 12 teams at the time. But you didn't have the same connection. And of course, with baseball, everybody has stats. Whether you're a pitcher or you're a hitter, you have stats. Football, it's not that way. They've really had to artificially or create stats like pancakes and all the rest of it for linemen. But Bill Willis, apparently, from what I was reading, really evolves what we call the linebacker position today. Big, about 6'2", 220, good speed. Didn't have the speed, let's say, of your defensive backs or your wide receivers, but was much faster and much more agile than your beats up front, like I like to say, your defensive tackles and defensive ends. So he really was a perfect fit as a linebacker and excelled. In fact, he played for a number of Browns championships teams during the late 40s and early 50s when they were in the AAFC. And then I do think he was on the NFL team that won the championship when the Browns first come into the league. Speaking of which, now you have a guy by the name of Marion Motley who played 105 games. Now, Football Reference, I'm going to do this. He scored a career 31 touchdowns, but that was not his value. If you've ever seen him, he was big. And I think what made him look even bigger, when I see films of him, I was actually surprised he was only 6'1", 232, because I'm telling you right now, anybody who saw him play would tell you, when you see the highlights, he looks like he's 6'5", 6'6", and he's like 300 pounds. This locomotive coming at the players. And instead of a player tackling him, it's like he swallowed the defender on the way down. Plus he was, the Browns, their home uniform is all white with just tinges of brown and orange. And at the time, I think the Browns seemed like they had white helmets that they were playing in. So you imagine this big 6'5", seemed to me anyway, frame, all white, just hurtling down the sidelines or the fields, and nothing could stop this runaway train. Well, I was correct in this. He ran for over 4,700 yards in his career, and good thing for Football Reference. Shout out to them that they do carry the AAFC records and kind of include them with the NFL. He does play not just for Cleveland. He does have a cup of coffee, play 6 games in his final year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. But ready for this? He averaged, now look, the AFC, the All-American Football Conference, they do swallow up 4 teams as they go under. But Cleveland was the team in that league. They were like the Yankees. I don't think they ever lost and Paul Brown was their coach, hence their nickname, the Cleveland Browns. Brown was phenomenal in that league, comes over, and to prove everyone wrong that it was just kind of like a minor league, he wins the championship his first year in the NFL. In fact, probably that's their, when I think about it, when you think about Cleveland, I think it's 1950. They come in and they win the NFL championship. They go 10-2. They defeat the LA Rams 30-28 in the championship. And of course, they were from Cleveland, the Cleveland Rams, and then they moved to LA. They beat the Giants 8-3 in the first round. That year, they were 10-2, and the only teams that they lost to were the Giants, who they get revenge on in the playoffs twice. So the Giants could not beat them. Third time's the charm in this case. So they lost to the Giants twice, but they win the championship that year in their first year of existence. Now, why do I say all this? Is because that year, Marion Motley was incredible. And he's 30 years old. He ran for a league-leading 810 yards. He only played 12 games. So he's running for just under 90 yards a game. Actually, probably about 75 yards a game. I apologize. So he's averaging 67.5 yards a game. But remember, it's only 12 games. He had 3 rushing touchdowns that year, and he had 1 receiving. He actually had 151 yards in receiving catches. So the man accounted for close to 1,000 yards. And remember, he's 30 years old. He makes the All-Pro, first team, and the Pro Bowl. And he does, like I say, lead Cleveland to a championship. And in his career, he actually led the league in rushing yardage that year, 5.8. Now, his career was 5.7. Football Reference includes the years in the AAFC. But probably if you just do the NFL, and of course Jim Brown has the high, I believe, of 5.2. If you take a look, his NFL career, he averaged, probably about 4.5. Still really good. You give the guy you give the ball 3 times to him on any set of series, he's getting your first down every time. Every time. So, Marion Motley. And actually, here's a good picture. I thought they wore white helmets, and certainly they do. Here's Motley, and of course you can see number 76. And I've seen, let's say, YouTube of him running with the ball 76 yards, number 76 just getting throttled. I am actually running out of time. So next week, I'd like to include Larry Doby and Jackie Robinson and talk about their contribution to the great game of baseball. This is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History. Thank you for letting me talk on and on and on. And I'll see you next week with another sports history episode.